Welcome back to the Autoblog Podcast. I'm Greg Migliore. We've got a great show for you this week. We're going to talk about the end of the Chevy Bolt, perhaps the return of the Chrysler 300, a smaller Ram that was spied, and a few other news and hits and things like that going on in the world. We drove some cool things, the Genesis GV70, that's electric, the Chevy Tahoe, that's definitely not electric, and the Polaris RZR XP. So with that, I will bring in the man who drove that, or maybe wrote it, I guess, whatever the term would be. That's Senior Editor for all things consumer, Jeremy Korzeniewski. Welcome.
Thank you, Greg. It's good to be here. And the RZR XP is definitely not electric, and people generally refer to them as riding as opposed to driving. But yeah, you could go either way.
Sounds good. We will spend your money, not your money specifically, Jeremy, but we will spend some money later in the show. If you have a spend my money question, or you just want to get into the podcast mailbag, that's podcast@autoblog.com. Shout out to our producer, Eric Meyer, who does a great job cutting this whole thing together. And of course, he does the soundtrack as well. So with that, let's just jump right in. The Bolt is donezo. I think for a long time, people confused this with the Chevy Volt. Literally, I was at the press conference in Detroit where they said Bolt, and everybody, all the journalists kind of looked around. They were like, what did they say? This thing's called the Bolt. So right off the bat, it was a good name. Both are good names, but I do think there was some challenges there. It definitely evolved into a very solid product. It had that sort of infamous battery issue a couple years ago, prompted a large recall, and to me, that kind of dented the image. But they are retiring it. They've sort of kind of hinted that it may come back, though. So the big takeaway in the near term, though, is it was a very relatively low cost electric car that basically anybody could get into, and that goes away. So that to me is the big takeaway, the most salient point. And I thought it was overall a very, very good product. I really did. Outside of that recall, it was an affordable electric car. It kind of morphed into like a crossover, if you wanted to go that way, the EUV. But I'm sad to see it go for now, but I think they're going to replace it with something else. The big deal here, I think, is they're going to use a more modern battery technology in the future Bolt, should they decide to reprise that name.
Right. Yeah, I'm sad to see it go. I was recently car shopping myself, and we were looking at electric vehicles, and the Bolt, and then the Bolt EUV, which is the slightly larger, little bit more crossover-y version, came up in our conversations, and we ended up disregarding it as a viable option because it looks like a boring vehicle. It's not perceived as a premium offering. And I think that's probably okay. The real problem is that pricing has kind of crept out of the Bolt's favor, I think. Like when the vehicle was initially launched, it was so much less expensive than the premium EVs. It was really kind of seen as like a Nissan Leaf competitor, and the EV market kind of moved up market from that. I think once Tesla came out with the Model 3 and then Model Y, and then lopped nearly $20,000 off the price of a whole bunch of them. That really brought those aspirational vehicles into potential pricing discussions and competition with the Bolt. I think the Bolt probably could have stood on its own as a standalone product, except that it didn't. I think it didn't appeal to people in the same way that a Tesla does. And I think that's really what, that was probably its biggest downfall. It just doesn't look like a premium product. And when you are looking at, the EV segment, the EV marketplace, you just have to ask yourself the question, what kind of product is it that I'm looking at? It was front wheel drive only. It doesn't charge as fast as some of its competitors, and it just doesn't have the kind of cachet of some of the competitors. And it's not just the Bolt. The same thing's happening with its biggest rival for low cost EV sales, the Nissan Leaf. That's getting phased out in favor of a more expensive product, the Ariya. I mourn the passing of these first. Well, I mean, the second generations of first generation EVs. The Bolt is a second gen product currently. The Leaf was a second gen product, but they kind of, these vehicles were developed really early on in the EV game, and I think that kind of came back to haunt them later on. GM is moving in a different direction with their Ultium platform. And that's the direction that they're going to go with it. And I think that's a good thing. You mentioned, what they were going to, come out with as a replacement. It's definitely going to be Ultium based, whatever it is. It's going to have the newest technology, the fastest charging, and it's going to be built on, same platform, use the same kind of cells that every other GM electric vehicle uses. Hopefully, it's not just the Equinox EV, which is, probably going to be an attractive base price. The low end Equinox EV is probably going to be priced similarly to the, most high end Bolt EUV. I would love to see GM come out with like a proper Bolt replacement using the Ultium architecture and not just rely on the Equinox EV to, take up the mantle.
Yeah, I think the other part of this too, and it does make a ton of sense where they want to sort of have one battery technology and then scale it across all their vehicles. That just makes sense, especially the newest one. But also there's a little bit of like survivor approach here. They're going to build the Silverado EV at this factory in, I think it's Orion, not Orion. It's Orion Township in like northern Oakland County. And
I did not know that. I didn't know that's how you pronounced it.
So I think it's Orion, but it looks like Orion because it's Lake Orion is the city, but it may be Orion Township. I have no idea. But they need room to build this thing. Yeah. And that's where they build the Bolt right now. So, I mean, do the math. What's going to do more for GM, an electric Silverado or, a 10-year-old electric car?
I mean, personally, as I said before, I'm mourning the loss of the, low-cost entry-level EV. But the Silverado EV is a much more important product. If they needed a spot to build it, it makes sense that they would, choose that location. And another issue is, people love to see these vehicles built in the United States, and they have to be built in the United States to qualify for the biggest government rebates. And they can't use any, Chinese or many other countries, but predominantly it's China. They can't use any of those minerals, or basically major parts of the batteries can't come from those locations. Well, they're basically telling us that, low-cost EVs, looking at that another way, low-cost EVs are getting legislated out of existence. It's hard to pay American labor wages, and it's hard not to use the lowest cost battery, systems possible and still make a profit on an electric vehicle. General Motors was, seemingly doing that with the Bolt. But, after all the battery fires, battery replacements, all of that, it's not super surprising to me that they're moving on from it. And it also makes me wonder how much profit they're making on each one of those vehicles. It's certainly not as much potential profit as they could make on a Silverado EV. Ford's earnings just came out and they showed, their electric division. If you kind of, what's the word, amortize or whatever. The costs, they're losing about $60,000 per electric vehicle that they're selling right now. I don't know that GM is the same way. GM's been, at this game a little bit longer with EVs. But you got to wonder what the profit margin on a Bolt is compared to some other potential vehicles, especially since it's running its own one-off battery system. And, it's not feasible probably in a dollars and cents world to continue building it and offering it at the price they were offering it at. So none of this is surprising. Like I said earlier, I just hope that something new comes to market from General Motors and other automakers that fills in that gap, because instead of starting at $40,000 for electric vehicles, it'd be really nice if there was something viable in that $25,000 to $30,000 and even $35,000 at the higher end range. Say the $25,000 to $35,000 entry-level electric vehicle is going to cease to exist after this year. Hopefully something fills that gap soon.
Yeah, that's a great number there from the Ford earnings. I mean, we consider a Mach-E, which is, a little more of a premium middle of the market offering, starts at like 41. And then and it's across the Ford electric lineup. I mean, that's a pretty big hole, you know, for everything to come out of. And then when you look at like the Bolt, which, started under 30, I mean, I don't know, can only imagine how much they were losing. It's older battery tech, so maybe some of that already been paid for, but either way, it probably wasn't a very profitable spot to be when it's also a small, compact car and crossover. So
and then the huge recall didn't help any.
I mean, just when you look at this, it's almost like, of course they did this. Was the product still pretty good? Yeah. But was the image damaged by that recall? Big time.
Yeah.
Is the battery technology old? Yeah. Do you need a place to build a Silverado? I mean, it's a slam dunk when you kind of sketch it out there.
Yeah.
So
it's still sad though. It was a good product. It had matured past its first generation, which honestly looked pretty dorky. It was a nice car to drive, but it looked like, a cheap hatchback, if you're honest. The second generation fixed some of that. It looked a lot better. But I mean, if you park a Bolt and a Leaf next to a Tesla Model 3, just standard range rear wheel drive, the Tesla looks and feels like much more of a premium product than the price gap might indicate it is. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the Model 3, was selling for a lot more money just a short little while ago. With how much Tesla's dropped off the price of that, suddenly people might be looking at that and, looking at the Model 3, the base one, and saying that's kind of tempting at that price. And in full disclosure, I made that decision myself. My wife and I did. We were looking for an EV and we ended up with a standard range Tesla Model 3 rear wheel drive. And after the $7,500 tax credit that we're, expecting to get next year, it really made a solid case for itself as a low cost EV. So, there's that end of it too. Yeah. And I mean, the way Chevy's going to fill out the lineup in the near term is the electric Equinox, the electric Blazer, the electric Silverado. If you're looking to get into an electric Chevy, they're going to have multiple choices for you. And they've already pre-verified that they'll qualify for the max tax credit, which is important. If you're,
that's right.
When you're at this, you're talking about the entry level electric vehicle market, price is a huge driving factor. That's why we call it entry level. The potential of getting up to $7,500 tax back, assuming you've got that much in liabilities, most people do, then that's a big thing. If you're looking at a $30,000 or $35,000 Equinox EV, the idea of getting $7,500, off your taxes the next year is a pretty compelling argument in its favor.
Cool. So let's shift over to the news out of McLaren. There's the 720 replacement is the 750.
We've left the entry level segment.
We have. We've decided to go from 30,000 to 330,000. And to talk about the new car, I mean, to boil it down, it's just they do all the McLaren stuff they do: faster, lighter, slightly different styling. I would love to drive one. Yeah. And then the other news that we can kind of like go back and forth on is it sounds like McLaren is going to build a 4-door vehicle at some point by the end of the decade. So, cool car. Let me put it that way for the 750. I think the last McLaren I drove was the GT, which is their daily driver, which was back in I think 2020. So it's been a minute, I think, since I've driven a McLaren. They're always fun to drive. They're easier to drive than you might think too. Good steering, decent visibility. They sound good. I can imagine this would be the same way. And I think this 4-door is probably a good move for them. McLaren, you talk about a company founded by Bruce McLaren, all that F1 heritage. McLaren still has the third or fourth most F1 titles of all time. But I mean, if Ferrari can do a crossover thing, so can McLaren. I think they just play on such a razor's edge as far as the financial stability of their company. I know they essentially sold their headquarters in Woking in England, which I actually went to one time. It's a beautiful place to hang out. Amazing factory and museum to F1 cars. But they need every dollar they can get. And I think if they can maybe expand the customer base a little bit to compete with the Urus and the Aston Martin DBX, I think they kind of need to do that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, totally. So I have driven a 720S. I've actually driven them a couple times. I had a loan at my home on a hardtop 720S, and then I did the first drive on the 720 Spider. And it was, I mean, in my mind, revolutionary as far as supercars go. The power from the turbocharged V8 in those things is, I mean, it's unbelievable. And, I've driven some other turbocharged supercars, some Ferraris, not turbo, but the Lamborghini Gallardo, some of the really high-end versions. And I mean, nothing accelerated in the heart of the power band like that 720S McLaren. Just absolute insanity and addictive. So the 750S is, the next generation, the next iterative product in that range. It's 30 more. So, is it going to be 30% better? Don't think so. But it is more powerful and lighter than the 720S. That car's biggest issue is putting power to the ground. If you didn't have your tires at optimum temperature, and if there was even a whiff of moisture on the ground, that rear wheel drive platform is going to be struggling for traction. This is not an all wheel drive car. But really, that car was so impressive that I figure this 750S is going to be, just that much more amazing to drive. So, hats off to those that can afford it, enjoy it. It's pretty sweet. As far as 4-doors go, yeah, they definitely need to get into that market. You said, Ferrari can do it if Lamborghini can do it. McLaren, they've got the racing pedigree, but no one's going to, there's not a single McLaren fan out there that's going to be like, oh, that's going to diminish the integrity of the brand. People don't think of McLaren. At least I don't believe that people think of McLaren the same way that they think of Ferrari and, to a lesser degree, Lamborghini. So yeah, they really should enter that space. They're talking 4-doors. Who knows what that means? If it didn't come out in some sort of, SUV-esque form, I'd be surprised. I can't think of any reason why McLaren shouldn't do that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it'll probably look pretty good too, because I think an area that McLaren has shined in is unique design. So,
yeah, kind of unique design compared to Ferrari and Lamborghini. No one sees a McLaren and they're like, oh, is that the latest Lamborghini? It's obviously a McLaren. I wish that some of their models looked a little bit more different. Like they had, I have to look closely. Okay, what is this? This is a 570 or this is a 720. They've all got a similar, kind of swoopy, rounded off wedge shape to them. I think you have to pay more attention to pick out your various McLaren models than you do, with Ferrari, for instance. But then again, someone showed me a picture of Ferrari not that long ago, and they said, "Which Ferrari is this?" And I was like, "I'm not really sure." Like, I had to look at the details to figure it out. Like, okay, it's this splitter and this tail light, so it's this version of this model. So, yeah, I mean, when you're talking about supercars, they all have, they have to look a certain way. So it's part of the game.
All right. So let's shift over back to electrics, to an electric 300. This could be related to the next Dodge Charger. Reportedly, dealers maybe got a preview of this, which a lot of times this happens. I remember back when the Viper was coming back, the dealers sort of saw these like mock-ups, and sometimes they actually would see like the car or like a rolling kind of chassis type of thing.
Yeah.
Just as a preview. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think you want to bring back that 300 name to keep the Chrysler brand kind of having that attitude. And it, again, like I said, it makes sense because we know there is going to be a replacement to the Charger and Challenger, and Charger and Challenger and 300 are related now.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you use that same sort of philosophy to update the 300? So I kind of think this is a must do actually for Chrysler.
Yeah, especially when you look at the products Chrysler currently has in their portfolio. It is Pacifica. Period.
Yeah.
So they've said that other vehicles are coming. We've seen bits and pieces of the Airflow, which we expect to be coming. If I can't think of any reason why they shouldn't leverage the platform that's going to underpin the next ridiculously powerful Dodge muscle car, this time electric. That's going to be a platform. They're going to have the battery technology. They're going to have them rolling down assembly lines. They really should do a Chrysler version as well. I think the big question is, what direction are they going to take the Chrysler brand? Dodge has now pigeonholed itself as like the performance, the American performance brand. And I think that's a good thing that they've got like that all to themselves, especially now that Pontiac no longer exists. Dodge is the muscle brand. Chrysler has to establish itself. It can't just be an expensive Dodge. That just doesn't make any sense. They need to figure out how to make it more Lincoln than Mercury in Ford terms. It can't just be like a slightly restyled, rebadged Dodge. It's got to be something with its own, unique selling proposition to, kind of fill out the Chrysler portfolio. And they don't want to step on Alfa Romeo's toes either. So Stellantis is kind of a premium heavy automaker right now with the wares that they offer in the United States. So it'll be interesting to see where they peg Chrysler, where it finally lands is, hopefully they make it, attainable American luxury. I think that's what made the 300 stand out so well when it initially came out in the mid 2000s. It was clearly a premium product. Everyone saw them going down the road. They recognized it as if not luxury, then at least a premium product. And it was still attainable. It wasn't priced out of the reach of people. So they could legitimately make a decision like, okay, do I want the Dodge or do I want the Chrysler? I think they need to follow that same model, in my opinion, and make it premium but attainable for working class Americans. And if they do that, I think they'll have a good shot of kind of reestablishing Chrysler as a real player that people are thinking about, and a household name again when talking about car shopping.
As the outgoing 300 shows, when you do it well, you do it with good design, nice interiors, for a long time, a powerful V8 engine, people will buy that car. They will subscribe to the notion of Chrysler as, some level of aspiration. So I think they could certainly do it again. I think it's also important for Stellantis to have Chrysler to be, it doesn't have to be like a superpower brand, but it needs to exist. Because right now, when I tell people like, and I'm industry insider, I cover stuff. Most of the people who are around me at least know like the vernacular that I use. When you say Stellantis, people still don't know who the hell you're talking about. FCA was bad enough and it stood for Fiat Chrysler Auto. So I think there's still just some symbolic meaning in having the Chrysler brand exist, because the headlines are, if they ever did close it, Chrysler closes. And then what do probably 85% of people think? That like the third of the big three is out of business. So you can't have that. Nobody picks up the nuance that, but wait a minute, like Dodge and everybody is still around, Ram, because it's Jeep. It's people just, that's lost. Yeah. So I think you want to keep that around. I mean, there's still the Chrysler building in New York. I think this is an area you want to be strategic. Like you don't need to relaunch it into, like I said, some superpower brand. But a 300, a Pacifica, maybe something else. That's all you got to do. Yeah. Keeps the sign up.
I mean, remember it used to be three fractions in the Chrysler lineup. There's the Chrysler brand. There was Dodge, which was kind of like the most mainstream of all. And then there was Plymouth, which was kind of like the entry into, the Chrysler portfolio with a slightly, lower cost, decontented a little bit, brand. They got rid of Plymouth and made everything just Dodge or Chrysler. And then they totally let Chrysler wither on the vine. They gave Dodge exciting, cool, fun things. I mean, they didn't do a good job with the Dodge brand in a lot of ways either. Like, there's no, for a long time, there was like no entry level Dodge. The 200 was gone. It used to be a Neon and then a Caliber, and all those things were gone. And they've really never filled that space properly, which is, sad. But where do they, like, even with the Chrysler brand, where do they do that? Like, where do they make the entry step into the brand? I don't think it's going to be Chrysler. It's probably going to be Dodge. But then, look at the Hornet. It's priced very high. I don't know. They're in an interesting spot right now. I always thought like, well, that's why they brought in, they got Fiat. Fiat can be like the entry into, the stepping stone into the company. And right now they don't really have that. So it'll be interesting to see where they go with it. I don't think that they can make Chrysler into that. Can they move Dodge, down market and still, keep that hot rod performance brand credibility? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Maybe they don't want to play in the entry level, space or positioning at all. But I don't know. We'll see. Like I said, I see Chrysler as premium, attainable American luxury. And I'd like to see him go in that direction with it.
Sounds pretty good. Let's go in a different direction with Ram. We've seen some spy shots of the smaller version of the 1500, for lack of a better way to put it. I think this is kind of overdue at this point. That's how it looks. Headline from news editor Joel Stocksdale is a scaled down 1500. I mean, you can't see much through these camo shots, although, the grille, it does look like a Ram, maybe even a little bit of a Jeep. We've kind of thought for a while it's going to be a unibody. So, I mean, it's in some ways, this is moving quite down the food chain, if you will, which I think makes sense. You don't really need, I don't think you have to have like this really like rough and tough thing in there, because you've got so many different versions of the Ram right now. But I do think they need something smaller. So,
well, so so the bogey is the Ford Maverick, right? Like that has proven to be extremely successful. Ford cannot build enough of them, and they're, if you were lucky enough to get onto the order slot and you're getting one delivered, your car is immediately worth $5,000 more than what you paid for it. That's what the Ford Maverick market is like right now. So that has proven that there is a huge appetite in the United States for an entry-level, usable pickup truck. Not every American buyer wants to tow the moon. They don't need to carry their entire house with them. A small entry-level, reasonably priced pickup truck that has enough capability for people in their lawn projects and their Home Depot runs and stuff like that. Huge market as established by the Ford Maverick. I'm a little bit surprised it's taken this long actually for Stellantis / Ram to get this ball rolling to the point where we're seeing prototypes on the road, because they sell these things already in many countries all around the world, and by all accounts, they're good products that, they sell well. People like them. There's the Ram, I don't know, what is it, 700 and then 1000, something like that. They call them, that they don't sell. They start with the 1500 here in the United States. There's the Fiats have different names too. I think one of them's the Toro. But they've got these vehicles, they've got the platforms, they're already being built. They basically, I think the hang up is being able to build them in the United States at a factory where they don't have to pay importation taxes on them, but I mean, that's why Mexican production is so popular. So yeah, I'm a little surprised it's taken this long. I like what I see from the spy shots. It looks like a fully competitive product. I'm sure it's front wheel drive based, just like the Maverick. Our spy shots show that there is indeed a rear axle and half shaft. So, there's going to be all wheel drive. It wouldn't surprise me if they followed the same Maverick, kind of blueprint in offering a low cost entry level model, with, something like a twist beam rear axle. And then, the all wheel drive is probably going to have a more sophisticated multi-link setup, which is what was spied, if you look at our story. So I'm excited for it. I think the United States wants it. Buyers in the US want this product on the market. And I hope it's not too far from now that it actually shows up.
I did an interview with the Ram CEO. This is close to 10 years ago, the Detroit Auto Show. And I remember he kind of made fun of when Ford and Chevy were both going, down the new Colorado, the new GMC Canyon, the Ranger was coming back. And he was just kind of what do they want? This isn't we don't see a market for that. And I mean, I guess he was wrong, first of all, but he was definitely right for Ram's strategy as far as they didn't do it. This was 8-9 years ago. And yeah. I think it was a big missed opportunity. And I think it's a point too where, I don't know if the mid-sized truck segment is really where you want to go at this point. The Maverick has been the secret sauce. It does better than the Ranger. And for a variety of reasons. I think if you're looking Ranger, you probably just talk yourself into an F-150. But if you're thinking truck and you don't need F-150, Maverick is really the answer.
Yeah.
And I think a smaller Ram would be the way to go. I think that really slots right in like a Maverick fighter. I think Ram brings a lot to the table. They bring a lot of creative things to their interiors and their design. Plenty of good engines from the international portfolio that they could choose. So yeah, I think a Ram Maverick fighter would definitely be a win. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, useful but efficient. That's the way to go here. Yeah. I think, useful, overly useful and inefficient. They've got, there's a ton of options. And I think, why isn't there a Dakota? Probably because there's still two Rams. How long has Ram been selling the Ram? What do they call it? The Classic,
Classic. It's the last generation Ram.
Yeah, exactly. They just keep pumping them out and they keep selling them. And I don't think that they could make a Dakota much cheaper than they're just selling the old Ram for, so why aren't they doing that? Well, they're probably because of that. They're probably selling all the Ram Classics that they can pump out. But yes, so I could see them disregarding that mid-sized market, but I mean, they could have. It was a total missed opportunity. You brought it out. You interviewed their CEO 10 years ago. they had these Fiat-based products on the market for a really long time. They'd even rebadged them as Rams in several markets. Like, they had this product ready to go way before Ford came out with the Maverick. They really could have capitalized on, an underserved segment, and now they're playing catch up, and they didn't have to. That's, I guess, outside of, our pay grade making product decisions for big companies, but it's hard to view that as anything other than a missed opportunity.
I mean, to your point, you look at a Ram Classic, it's like $30,000, and I'm looking at it, and it's on the Ram website. They're offering like a sale right now, 10% below MSRP. I almost can't believe, like, I'm looking at the old truck.
Yeah.
Like, I knew obviously we both knew they did this. Admittedly, I kind of forgot about it. When did the current generation of Ram launch? Like 2019?
So, I think probably 2019, something like that. Yeah.
So you're essentially buying an 18 truck that's badged 22 that if you go back 10 years before that, it's like a 2000. You're buying a brand new 2009 Ram at this point.
Yeah,
if
exactly.
That's what you want to go with. And for what it's worth, that could be 100% the right move for somebody.
Yeah,
that is like 100% like an okay strategy.
Yeah, it's not like it turned into a bad product overnight or anything. It's not as good as the current one, but it's also $15,000 cheaper than the current one. So it's a super smart strategy play. GM has been known to do that in the past too. What do they call it? They don't do the Classic. I think that's Ram, but GM does. Was it Custom or something like that they call it? Which is kind of odd naming, but
you can have it any way you want it as long as it's outdated.
Yeah, yeah. There you go. New tagline. You heard it here first.
Yeah. Now that's in some ways that's mind blowing, but
yeah.
All right. So let's look to the future with the Genesis X. This is the amazing convertible that I believe we first saw about a year ago at the New York Auto Show. Great looking vehicle. It's kind of like an old school, almost like just long hood, long wheelbase, short deck in the back, lots of lighting. It looks like, classic, but also futuristic. We all love the concept. There's a trademark out there that it sounds like it could be maybe on its way to production under the name GT90. Perhaps, we'll see. CarBuzz is reporting it. Cadillac has thought about doing this for years. They never really did. You've got the Celestiq, but that's like super low, super expensive and super low volume. But they might do this. And honestly, I just got out of the GV70 Electrified. You did too somewhat recently. They have awesome design.
Yeah.
So I think if there's a brand that could pull this off and it's trying to elevate its brand because it has zero history, sure, you got to do stuff like this.
Yeah. And I mean, they've done a couple of these high-end concepts. They've done coupes. They've done kind of fastback things. They've done the convertible, the one we're talking about right now. And each one of them has been extremely well received. They're gorgeous. They're beautiful. People are like, oh yeah, you should build that. You should build it. You should build it. The question is, how much could they sell it for? How much are they going to invest on having a halo product when they're still trying to establish themselves with their, mainstream sedans and crossovers? Maybe now is the time. I just got done saying we don't make the big bucks making these decisions. We can look back on it and say oh, that was a missed opportunity. They really should have done that. But, it's probably a little bit different when you're the one, signing, writing checks and figuring out where to invest the money and where not to invest it. And, getting back to the Chevy Bolt scenario, you're probably looking at a lot of different, aspects to it. Where are we going to build it? How much are we going to pay for the labor? How much can we sell it for? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I hope now's the time. These things are absolutely gorgeous, and I would love to see Genesis have a true kind of flagship product. You mentioned Cadillac. Cadillac's tried this a couple times with the first the Elante, which was kind of a disaster of logistics, flying specially equipped airplanes around with Italian bodywork and then putting, American V8 engines and all that and then selling them here. And, then they did the XLR, which was, like the Cadillac Corvette, except with the Cadillac Northstar powertrain. And they even did a coupe, version of the Volt, the Cadillac ELR. And none of those were successful products, really. So there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. I think, Cadillac is a brand that's kind of ripe for that kind of thing, and people expect Cadillac flagships. Genesis is still trying to get their name out there. It would be, kind of an unexpected move from a brand like Genesis, but it could really do a lot of the heavy lifting that Genesis needs for people to know the Genesis brand. Like they put these things on commercials that are absolutely beautiful, and they're like, "What is that? That's a Genesis. What's a Genesis?" And they're going to look it up, and they need that. They need that name recognition right now. So maybe now's the time. I hope it is.
All right, sounds good. So speaking of the time, this is perhaps overdue, but the train station in downtown Detroit, just on the edge of it. If you've ever driven into the city, perhaps for the auto show, maybe you live in the area, it's a huge eyesore, obviously. Ford is taken the almost Herculean task of revitalizing it. They're going to make it a center for a number of Ford employees, but it's going to be a whole campus for all sorts of things. Some of that may be like advanced technology, autonomous stuff. I was able to get a minute with Bill Ford, who's the executive chairman at this kind of ribbon cutting event. And it sounds like they haven't totally figured out exactly what each of the teams is going to do there. Either way, taking one of the city's biggest eyesores and making it, very stunning building, I think is going to be one of the biggest parts of his legacy. Let's put it that way. I went to the book depository, not to get too insidery here, but that's this other building next to it that is going to be an incubator. And Ford is sort of behind that as well. And this was like phase one of the campus opening. So it's really cool. I will just say this, if you're from the area, from the region, this is really going to be something worth checking out. And it's going to be, for a large part, open. They're going to have restaurants. They're talking about having a boutique hotel. What I saw, it was a week ago at this point, was very impressive, very well intended. It was cool. There was a celebratory air. They were passing out champagne even before, Bill Ford gave his remarks. So, check it out. I have a story on the site. It's been up for a few days at this point, but if you're interested, check it out. Some nice pictures. You can see what the building I'm referencing is, and then the larger part of the project, which is this towering 1913 train station that will be done soon.
Yeah, it's I'm just going to say, growing up in the Great Lakes era, I was born in Toledo. Every time we drove up into Detroit, which was quite often, we'd pass that building. And, you describe it as an eyesore, and rightfully so, because it got, when was it last used? In the 80s, I think?
83 or 87, somewhere in there.
Yeah. So I was a youngster when it was last used, but I remember driving by it and just being super impressed by this imposing, this architecturally very interesting building. I am always in favor of restoration. The problem is it's much more expensive to restore a building like that to its former glory than it is to raise it and build new on the site. But I am absolutely not in favor of that as a strategy. I like the idea of, spending the money and doing it right. I mean, I live in a house that was built in 1885. That's, I do that on purpose. It's kind of an obvious thing to me that you take this thing and you lovingly bring it back. So I'm super happy that they're doing it. I have to wonder what some of Ford's shareholders think about this? Like, is it a pet project of Bill Ford's? Is he trying to establish a legacy? How much of Ford's money, the company, is being used to do this versus Bill Ford's personal money? There's a lot of questions that, if I were a shareholder, I may be interested in. Not me personally, and I say I mean like the greater we, the people in general who care about such things. If I were a shareholder, I'd be like, yeah, do this. I'm willing to take a little bit less money on because I believe in the restoration and I believe in making this thing beautiful again. I really hope that it is as stunning when it's done as it probably was when it was first built. I think it's great for Detroit that this is happening. And 50 years from now, if it is part of Bill Ford's legacy as what he left, as a person, not just not just named after, not just the name of the company, but him individually as a person, I'm all for it. I think that's great. I'm excited about, the first time I actually get to walk inside and see.
I walked through it in June of 18, back when 2018, not 1918, when Ford first bought it. And, it's what you would expect in there, but it's also like a very unique office space. Mm-hmm. And what they're also arguing is that this isn't just like a vanity project, that it's going to be a place people want to work. Like Bill Ford said, hey, we've received no shortage of people who are raising their hand who want to work there. They're way more excited about, working in this place than they are just like, one of Ford's many office structures, here in the suburbs. So he argues that this is going to help them attract talent who want to live it's in a really cool neighborhood called Corktown. People are going to want to, come here from around the country, around the world. So for what it's worth, I think, the questions you lay out are things I laid out, a few years ago. And I was like, really, you want to invest in this 110-year-old train station, 105 at the time? Like, maybe you should build another electric car. Like, that's a very fair point to make. Yeah. But I mean, I think he's got the logic. I also happen to agree with him. I think as a guy who's from the region, like, good, take a risk, do it. I think we're all going to be better for it. So this is one where it's like, I think he's going to find a way to make this work, and it's going to be a part of, remaking the city's skyline, which is just outstanding.
Maybe he should have bought Twitter.
Well, if you want to talk about ways to wisely spend your money, mm-hmm. I think, revitalizing, an iconic structure is much better than going on a social media platform. So,
hey, I'm just saying, there's a lot of ways that rich people spend their money, and you kind of scratch your head financially and say, like, really? But, well, okay. I'd rather see Bill Ford spend his money on revitalizing this iconic thing than, pet vanity projects of, whatever those may be. Twitter.
Yeah, I think we can maybe leave it here. That's the big difference between Elon Musk's approach to, executive leadership and what Bill Ford's approach is. So,
anyway.
All right, so let's
we collectively digress.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Genesis GV70. We'll kind of blitz through the review section. We had a pretty beefy news section, mm-hmm. but we'll run through these. You and I have both driven this at this point. You drove it. Where did you drive it? North Carolina?
No, Georgia.
Georgia. Okay, mm-hmm. So a little bit warmer when you were down there than lovely, it is probably here right now, even. Electric Genesis, I think it looks great. I drove the all-wheel drive Prestige version, which came in at $75,000. I imagine you probably drove maybe a couple of the trim levels. There's a couple of them. I was super impressed. What did you think?
It's a beautiful car. That's like walking up to it and walking away from it. Your first and last thoughts are that is a premium product, mm-hmm. Which is great for Genesis. The nitty gritty of it, there's some issues. It doesn't have the range that, that a flagship product might really need to have. That's kind of like my biggest potential demerit is, if you're comparing it to some of the other flagship EVs out there, it's 100 miles shy in range compared to some of those. But not every EV needs to have 300, 350 miles of range. What is it, like 230, 240 miles of range, something in that vicinity?
236.
236, yeah. So it's kind of on the low end for an EV that came out in 2022 as a 2023 product.
Yep.
So a little on the low range.
A little light, yeah.
Yeah. If that's enough for you, though, it's a great product. It's a joy to drive, a joy to look at, super pleasant to sit in, whether you're driving or as a passenger. It's a really nice vehicle.
Yeah, the interior is gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
I have a review that's going up, recording this on Wednesday. I think it's going up on Thursday. So by the time you're listening to this, check it out. I compared it to Mercedes just because of the aesthetics. Like the one I drove, was this kind of like creamy white leather going across, lots of very nice trim and finishing.
Yep.
Like it reminded me of like the EQS, not quite at that level, obviously, but like they went for it. It looks like, a world-class luxury car. And it even had that kind of airy, like clean electric feel that you would expect. Not like old money, more like looking towards the future. So love that part of it. I fast charged it. That worked out pretty well too.
Yeah, it does have good fast charging. What is it, 250 kilowatts, something like that, I think? Something
like that, yeah. I didn't totally top it off. I just kind of needed to like fill it up so I wasn't giving it back to the fleet guys,
Drained,
on fumes such as they are.
So to speak, yeah. Here's the last thing that I'll say about it. When you say American luxury, you have an idea of what that means. When you say German luxury, you have an idea of what that means. When you say Japanese luxury, again, you have an idea of what that means. Genesis is currently defining South Korean luxury. They are setting the standard. They're creating a whole new segment. And when you get into a Genesis, it's nothing like getting into a Lexus. It's nothing like getting into, a Cadillac. Nothing like getting into a, Mercedes EQ something. Like they've all got their established, areas that they excel in. And Genesis is currently defining South Korean luxury. And I think they're doing a brilliant job at it. Like the idea that like they want, their marketing people told me that they want to be quote unquote distinctly Korean. And I think that's where they're really nailing the design. They don't look like anything else. You see it, you might not know what it is, but you certainly don't mistake it for a BMW, which I think is really important. And hats off to their designers for really stepping out there and doing such a good job and hitting it out of the park.
I think that's a big transition from where they were back when Genesis was like housed under the Hyundai brand. And they were kind of okay with you thinking it was a Lexus or a Mercedes from a distance. I agree with you completely. I think they're not only defining luxury for South Korea, I think they're also defining it just for the luxury segment in general. I think they've brought something new to the conversation. They've weaved a lot of different things. Like some people thought their cars looked like Bentleys, almost cartoonishly at first, but I think they're really pulling it off. It's, the only thing they don't have right now is just that widespread name recognition. And they're trying to get there. They're doing that, golf tournaments. They're talking about doing that Genesis X concept. I think they will get there because the product is just so good right now.
I think Genesis' future is very bright. I think, money that's being invested in there now, it from, parent company Hyundai Group is going to be well invested in the brand's future. I think they're going to see, big dividends moving forward. It wouldn't surprise me if 10 years from now, if Genesis was mentioned in the same breath as Lexus, Acura, Cadillac. Right now they don't have that kind of recognition of being like a household name that everybody knows, but I don't think that they're far from achieving that. And I think they're definitely going to.
All right. So let's go back to a product that's a little bit older. This is the Chevy Tahoe. It's been around for a while, and I enjoyed it. I had it for a week. I drove. What's interesting about this is it's not just like a regular Tahoe. It's the RST Performance.
Oh, that's
so
what
it comes.
Okay.
Yeah, it comes in at. Mine came in at a little over 81. Yeah, so it's a lot. But just curious, do you know what the RST Performance is? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I do.
Oh, you do? All right. Because for what it's worth, road test editor Zach Palmer sent me an email. He was like, hey, man, the fleet didn't exactly tell us. You have the performance one. And I was like, oh. And then we both kind of like went back and looked at the story because this nominally debuted at the Detroit Auto Show. Apparently it was the only reveal that actually just was kind of on display there as opposed to some of the bigger, flashier ones. But this is a really cool thing. It's the V8, a little bit more power, better air intake, catback exhaust. The air intake looks cool. I popped the hood. It's kind of got this red like filter thing going on. It looks cool. You get a little bit more horsepower, so it gets you up to 433. That's 13 more, 7 more pound-feet of torque, 467. 0 to 60 for a Tahoe is 578, is 5.78. That's pretty quick for a Chevy Tahoe.
Yeah.
Basically, the quickest version before was more like 5.9, which that still kind of blows my mind that the Tahoe can go that quickly. And then what you do is you get into a bunch of cop stuff. It's basically like cop suspension, cop spring and chassis calibration. It's 0.04 inches lower, so that's about 10 millimeters. Really nice brakes on this thing. They're 25% larger. Scrubs about 6 feet of stopping distance. The brake pedal feels a little bit different, and it rolls on 20-inch aluminum wheels. Plus, the badges are like all the badges, Tahoe, the RST, Rally Sport Truck, which is already kind of cool. They're black. So you get that with this one was red. It's just a really cool looking SUV. So I had a lot of fun driving it. It sounds good. I'm writing up a road test on it, and I do have a video review that's going to go into the Autoblog Garage, probably in a later date as well. But if you're listening, this Tahoe review is going to come out probably next week. So look for that. And I just kind of thought, who this car is basically, or truck is for, is basically the person who maybe had like an Impala SS about 10 years ago. Maybe you had a Pontiac G8. I don't know. Maybe you liked the Impala SS from 94 to 96. It's sort of like the Tahoe SS that you the sort of Tahoe SS that you were hoping for. So, because it's already got that big V8. They can't really put anything bigger in there. Let's put it that way.
Well, the regular RST, not the performance, but the regular RST is still a 5.3 with no additional power. So,
yeah.
They're kind of, is it good marketing or bad marketing? I don't know. The fact that none of us really know what this thing is until it shows up in our driveway tells me it probably could have been announced and promoted a little bit better. But I mean, the way that I'm looking at this, the specs are there. Like if Chevy would have rolled this thing out and called it the Chevy Tahoe SS, we all would have been like, oh, what's this? Because we know what SS means. But Chevy does have history with the RST badge as well, but it's always just kind of been a like appearance package more than anything else. They had the RS for forever. I think there were periods in the 80s where the Camaro RS was extremely popular. This is RST, which I assume stands for Rally Sport Truck, without looking it up.
Got it.
All right. So
first used in 1987.
Well, there you go. So now it's Rally Sport Truck Performance Edition. So I'm like, is that like really the way that you want to do this? I don't know. It's what they did. But the product itself, the specs sound great. The brakes, the handling, the engine, everything about it sounds like right on the money. I looked it up. It's about $8,500 more. That's like that. That's what it adds. This feels like $8,500 worth of equipment.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You're spot on because it includes basically like everything from the luxury package, if you will. So you get all the safety and interior upgrades. You're getting all of that stuff. which I think is actually probably worth a good chunk of it.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting the 6.2 liter,
which is huge.
It's a big deal, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There are other ways to step into it if you don't want all this other like performance stuff. But I mean, this is a pretty good way to do it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And then you get all the chassis stuff. Mm-hmm. So, and there is a bit of appearance stuff here too. I think it's a good move. And this is not to be confused with, there's another like performance quote unquote version, which basically gives you the V8 and the dual exhaust. And it does give you magnetic ride control for about $3,800, but you get nothing else. And to your point, it is a little confusing that 2 guys, 3 guys, if we bring Zach into this, we're only vaguely aware this thing existed. Mm-hmm. And there's also another thing like it that's, I'd almost call it like a scat back, like what Chrysler did, where you could get the big Hemi V8 with nothing else. That's kind of out there too. But overall, I mean, if I were getting a Tahoe, I would really look at this,
Yeah.
It's the way I would put it is because it's not cheap. You kind of have to make that mental calibration. This is kind of where my draft of the story has ended. I think I need to polish it. Is like, what kind of Tahoe are you going to buy? Are you going to buy the one that's like 50 or 60, like the low end Tahoe? Mm-hmm. Or are you already going to get a bunch of stuff? Because if you're already going to get north of 70 and you want to drive something fun and fast, spend another $8,000 because you're getting a bunch of luxury stuff baked into the whole package. Mm-hmm. But if you're looking to get more like the Tahoe family hauler with the 5.3, you're looking to spend $65, then obviously don't do this.
Yeah.
So
I mean, looking a couple observations, just glancing around and seeing how many high country badges I see on the road. I think a lot of people are already spending the money on these things. Yeah. So this is like a more performance oriented premium offering alongside something like the high country, which is like the more luxury premium. My second observation is there is an RST Suburban. So what are the chances that, next year we see an RST performance Chevy Suburban? I don't know. We'll see. I mean,
the one thing I would say is it is a larger vehicle. I don't really know if you're going to get the benefits of using some of these performance chassis things, but you know what? That's never stopped a truck maker from, doing this stuff. So
it's kind of funny, we're splitting hairs. Like, well, it's not, the Tahoe is big, but it's not as big as the Suburban. So
right. I think you make a great point though. Like there are having more options at higher price point is just where the market is.
Yeah.
Like Chevy will help you spend your $70,000 to $80,000 on your Tahoe, however you want.
Yeah, however you want to spend that money. I would rather have this. Yeah. Me too.
I would than a high country.
Yeah, me too. I actually, not to get too far into the weeds here in this discussion, I am not digging these super premium, high luxury trucks and SUVs. Like, I wrote an opinion piece on it a little over a year ago, where I basically said that full-size trucks are the best and worst vehicles that, you can buy in America right now. You can buy a perfectly nice pickup truck or SUV with all the things that you want on it for $55,000 or $60,000. Or you could throw exclusive cowhide on it, big, huge chrome badges, filigree gauges, like all these things that do absolutely nothing to the ownership experience other than look cooler to you. It's absolutely not my thing. Would I buy a high country? No. Would I buy an RST Performance? Okay, yeah, I get it. I get that. I get the reason of existence here. Just my 2 cents. I'm never one to tell someone how they should spend their own money. I'm never one to say like, oh, you made a poor decision here. It's your money. You buy what you want to buy. You want to buy a high country, go right ahead. But there's like literally no good reason in my mind to spend that extra $20,000 on, cowhide as opposed to, some other lower grade of leather, which is still very high grade, and filigree gauges, and big like belt buckles inside the vehicle is basically how it's adorned. So just my 2 cents. I'd rather see them offer these things in like a performance package as opposed to a chrome dipped package.
Yeah. So it sounds like Ram and sometimes Ford is definitely not your jam when it comes to the higher trims. Chevy, the high country can be very of that mood as well.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's a bad product. It's just I didn't wear Ed Hardy shirts when those were super popular either. I didn't get the your sequins ad, twice make it twice as expensive. Just it wasn't my thing. And like these chrome dipped premium pickup trucks and SUVs aren't my thing either. But that's just me.
All right. So tell me about this Polaris off-road ride, as you corrected me earlier, which is good. What was that like?
Okay. So have you ever driven one of these or ridden one of these side by sides? Okay.
I have not.
So here's kind of how to look at it. It's anything that you picture yourself doing in a Jeep Wrangler or a Ford Bronco.
Okay.
You can do in something like a RZR, except you can do it at like 4 or 5 times the speed. So, whereas you go like rock crawling in a Wrangler, you go bounding over rocks in something like a RZR. And so it's, think of it as a very specific product niche. Like, it's for those people who are willing to spend $20,000 to $30,000 on a vehicle that they're only going to go off-road in, and just discretionary fun. Put it that way, discretionary fun. That seems like a lot of money, but there's a whole heck of a lot of people who buy Broncos and Wranglers with $30,000 of off-road options on them. And then, they risk damaging their super pricey daily driver vehicle on the trail. So, if you're thinking about, who is it that's buying these things, it's those same people, but they're making an informed decision and getting the dedicated off-road vehicle and the dedicated on-road vehicle. And they are an absolute blast to ride. So specs, it's got, I think 114 horsepower, which I pointed out in my ride review report that's about the same as my 1990 Jeep Wrangler had. But it weighs about half the amount, and it has, way more suspension, forgiveness and travel. So, that kind of tells you what the thing is capable of doing. These things get up and boogie, and they do it on the kind of terrain that it's actually difficult to even hike across, so, and they do it at speed with reliability and durability. So some of the most impressive products, I think, right now in the power sports industry are these side-by-sides or UTVs. The Polaris RZR XP is the best-selling sport side-by-side in America. It has historically been since it was released in 2014, and it's certainly not going to give up that position anytime soon. It's a stellar product aimed right in the heart of the marketplace, and it does everything as well as you'd expect it to be able to.
Okay, so spending your money, and we'll get to this in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Would you rather just get like an old Wrangler, like a beater off-roader, spend your money that way, or spend your money on like a brand new Polaris product? Which way would you go for like your up north, your UP cottage? What would you do? So
the big deciding factor here is use case, because these RZRs are not street legal. There's some provisions in certain states where you can throw a plate on it that allows you basically to get from trail to trail. But you cannot use this as a daily use vehicle. It's solely an off-road toy. I don't exist in the price bracket where $20,000 to $30,000 for a sole off-road toy is in my wheelhouse. So if you're asking me personally what I would do, well, I could get double duty out of something like a Wrangler, but the RZR is just an absolute blast. The good thing is you don't have to buy, like, if this appeals to you, you don't have to buy a brand new $25,000 RZR XP. They exist for those out there that want them. But if you get one that's 3 or 4 years old, you're going to pay half that. And you're still going to have a blast on it. So, like, thank the wealthy off-roaders for, keeping these things, on the road and keeping them available if you want to buy one on the used market. And actually an extra plug for Polaris here. The Polaris Exchange, is a really great place to find used models. And yeah, I mean, if buy a used one, and if you find out that like this is something that you and your family are absolutely loving, and then you can justify the $25,000 on the new one after a few years of proving that like this is like a family lifestyle item for you, then that's what you should do. I certainly don't think people should just like, oh, I love this idea, I'm going to go rush out and blow $30,000 on one of these things. That's not me. That's not how I would do it. But I'm also, also not going to tell people, like I said a minute ago, how to spend their money. So, it just depends on how much discretionary income you have, I guess.
Okay, so what I need you to do right now is tell somebody how to spend their money.
Yeah.
So we just, we kind of walked right into that one, but hey, we gotta have some fun here. So this comes from Our Cars, where we like to just cherry pick some things from Reddit every now and then. If you're on Reddit, hopefully, you're reading some of the Autoblog stuff that makes its way over there. And if you want to get a Spend My Money, I believe the queue is open. The cupboard is bare. That's podcast@autoblog.com. This one I thought was cool because I like the Kia Stinger. And the writer currently has a 2023 Kia Stinger GT2 all-wheel drive with no mods, considering swapping it for a 2022 Audi SQ5 Prestige with a sport package. Why? Expecting another child, worried the car seat in the back it'll just be tight, and then having room for everybody to sit back there on longer trips. I mean, that's what you'd expect of Stan. The family has a 2023 Hyundai Palisade Calligraphy. Very nice SUV for the longer trips, but he's looking for something sportier for the daily driver. So basically, it's kind of a binary question here. Stay with the Stinger or move over to the Audi SQ5? Over to you.
I would absolutely stay with the Stinger. For my long drives, I would use the Palisade. It's a very, very nice car. If you really want to spend your money, to this person who wrote this, I would direct you to the Genesis dealer for all the reasons that we've previously talked about, the Genesis GV70. I wouldn't get the electrified because that's not what you're looking at. But if I were shopping for an Audi SQ5, I would end up at the Genesis dealer with a GV70 and the 3.5 liter twin turbo V6 engine. It is more powerful, more luxurious in my mind, a nicer vehicle, nicer package overall than the SQ5. So if you're looking to spend money, I would not spend it on an SQ5. I'd probably spend it on the GV70 3.5 twin turbo. But if you're just asking me, should I trade in my Stinger on an SQ5 when I've already got a Palisade in my driveway, the answer would be no. I would keep the Stinger as a performance vehicle and use the crossover for crossover-y things when necessary.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, you already have a sporty sedan, which is about to be no longer a thing. So there's that. If you're like to your point, if you're looking to just change things up a little bit, while you're at that Genesis dealer, check out the G70, which is related to the Stinger. It's a lot of fun to drive. You could do that too. Genesis has been thematically part of this podcast throughout the different segments.
Yeah, I know.
But I think you probably want to, this is one where you maybe hold your cards. You can always see how it works out too. Like maybe you get those car seats back there, and you find that you do need to take the Kia on some longer drives. You're like, this just isn't going to work. Like I've put a car seat in the back of a Stinger before. It's a little tight. I can only imagine trying to get two back there. But you do have the Palisade Calligraphy, which is a beautiful large crossover. So I think you probably want to see just how much of a problem this is before going over to the SQ5, unless of course you just want the SQ5.
Exactly. If you just want it, then and you've got the cash for it, I think you should buy it.
Yeah.
Like I'm all for spending the money on the thing that you want. My other question would be, is because, I've never tried to put car seats in a Q5 or SQ5. And the SQ5, you should know if you're listening, is a Q5, but the sportier, more premium version of it. How much bigger is the back seat and rear door opening of the Q5, SQ5 than the Stinger? I don't know. Like, I'd have to get my tape measure out and figure that out. I don't have kids, so I'm not throwing child seats in it all the time. But I'm just wondering how much greater utility there is on the Q5 platform versus the Stinger platform. You might need to step up. Like, if you really need the utility, you might need to step past the SQ5 anyway and go up a model in size. So I don't know. I don't think it's a lateral move that I would personally suggest making. But man, if you take an SQ5 out and you've got the money for it and you love it, then absolutely you should do it. But yeah, it's not something I would advocate for.
All right, sounds good. So that's all the time we have this week. Jeremy, good hanging out with you. Good catching up. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get the show. Again, send us your Spend My Monies. I'll say it for the third or fourth time. Podcast@autoblog.com. Be safe out there, and we'll see you next week.